Alright, well my editing skills are crap, but can the same thing be said about Underworld Blood Wars? Stick around and find out. I don't know, is there like a vampire theme? I was trying to think, well, what should I sing? Like frickin' Monster Mash or something? I don't know. Anyway, I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions, here with my uncut review of Underworld Blood Wars. The synopsis reads, the next installment in the blockbuster franchise. Underworld Blood Wars follows vampire death dealer Celine, Kate Beckinsale, as she fends off brutal attacks from both the Lycan clan and the vampire faction that betrayed her. With her only allies, David and his father Thomas, she must stop the eternal war between Lycans and vampires, even if it means she has to make the ultimate sacrifice. Alright, I'm a big fan of at least two of the Underworld movies. I really enjoyed the first one, even though it was kind of like, in many ways, ripping off of the aesthetics of The Matrix. I really liked Underworld Evolution as well, and I loved the prequel starring Michael Sheen, Rise of the Lycans. That was my favorite of the series. And it's kind of, for me, gone off the rails with Underworld Awakening, which was the last one that came out about 3 years ago. And so I was really hoping that this one would kind of right the boat and get it back to the kind of things that I liked about the series. So let me tell you what I think. First off, let's talk about just the story, and this is probably where I'm going to spend most of my time. The intro voiceover just like gets the daughter out of the way. Celine picked up a daughter in the last movie, and they kind of ditched Michael in the story. He became a background character, and this one was about and Awakening was about like realizing, coming to terms with the fact that she has a daughter, and then eventually getting around to, okay, I have this daughter, now let's go find Michael, and that's where the Awakening movie ends. Well, in this movie, in the intro voiceover, they get the daughter out of the way. The daughter is in hiding, and even from Celine, she's being kept secret to keep Lycans and vampires from getting her blood, which could make either race apparently much more powerful. And so the daughter's off in hiding. Celine finds herself again in the war between vampires and Lycans. Maybe I got distracted, but I kind of missed exactly why she was bothering to get in the mix of all that. The story was originally going to be a reboot of the series starring the vampire David, which is the son of like one of the elders of the major, whatever council of vampires. And David was introduced in the last film, and this movie feels like a modified version of that intended story. The focus is divided all over the place, divided between Celine and David and the ambitious leaders that are on the vampire and Lycan side of the war, including subplots for each of those leaders. As in the last movie, this is not a series about star-crossed lovers anymore. I wish it was. It's not even about Celine much of the time. And the focus is divided so much that I didn't have time to care about any of the characters and their motivations. The scenes were edited so quickly, even when they were having dialogue that I think was supposed to be character building. Sometimes you just need some silence in the space between those lines of dialogue so that the actors have time to give us a little subtext so that we can pick up on something, some internal feeling or motivation that's just not exactly what is on the black and white written page. I like a little bit of character, so that I can care about these people. I would love to hear what the filmmakers were thinking with taking the series where they have. I would have preferred a hard reboot over this seeming attempt at slowly transitioning us over to having David as our lead character. His background and his motives haven't been explored over the course of the 2 movies he's been in now anywhere near the way Celine's motives were explored over just one, I mean, within the first, 45 minutes of the first Underworld movie, you can at least tell that there's an attraction between her and this guy Michael, which is putting her at odds with, all the people that are in her life that she's ever known, And that just took about 45 minutes to establish that level of tension. And we just haven't gotten near enough about this David guy's background, what he cares about, for me to really care about him. So I have no reason to root for him as a hero. he's a decent guy, but being a decent guy in an action movie isn't enough for me to really want to feel for him to succeed and rise above the all the crap that's being flung at him. Instead, I would have preferred them opening the movie with a scene in which Celine and her daughter find Michael, and then she watches them both die. Now, that's not my ultimate preference, but it just seems like that's kind of how the filmmakers were like, we got to get rid of the daughter and we got to get rid of the love interest. So let's just have Celine doing action stuff. Okay, well, if you've got to get them out of the way, then at least bring them both in and like do CG versions of Scott Speedman's face again like you did in the last movie. Oh my gosh. But get those characters in there long enough to kill them off so that she is just totally shattered by that, and then the rest of the movie can be this revenge flick, which is very emotionally fueled. And since I have a history, at least with the Michael character, not so much, I didn't really have a chance to develop care for the daughter character, but I might have felt a little bit there. Then I could have sympathized a little bit. You have 2 movies of this Michael character and the bond that she's established with him. So use that to fuel her motivation in this movie. I just didn't feel it. But yeah, then make this one like the last movie where like on this revenge-fueled, tear, she just like wipes out the vampires or the werewolves or both or whatever she's got to do. But, just kind of use that as the catalyst to bring this whole thing crashing down. That would have been a cool way to do it. But instead, we don't get an update on Michael until near the end of the movie. I won't give any spoilers for that. But the update there did help to bring a tiny amount of much-needed emotion, I think, to Celine's story and her action scenes. And Celine's story, though, is still way open-ended as the credits roll. So the movie also changed the world a bit. Vampires are dressed a bit less in the classy goth style and more in the kind of nightclubby, fetishy style of the Matrix movies, if you can think back to those. There's also a white-haired clan of vampires with mystical powers that's introduced, which felt weird to me given how much these movies have tied the mythos of vampires and lichens to biology and tried to root it in, like, them being, just kind of freaks of nature, just these kind of biological oddities, rather than being supernatural in origin. Well, suddenly they bring for the first time this what seems to me to be clearly supernatural elements into the story. So that just felt it just felt weird. It just feels like in so many ways this series has lost its way and its sense of identity of what it's about. Now I love the visual aesthetic of the series, and there's still enough of that absolutely present, even though they went a little bit latexy in some of the vampire costume designs. There's still a lot of that ancient goth meets modern weapons and tech. I love those, mashing up those backdrops. And then the serious tone that at least it's aiming for, I appreciate. I love the monster movie aspect when people are changing and screaming as they change, and I love that kind of stuff. And I love the superhero style action, but none of that makes up for a lack of characters that I can care about. So the whole movie really fell flat for me. I never cringed out of distaste, like, oh, that's cheesy, oh, that's terrible, oh, that's horrible acting there, or whatever, I was just largely uninterested as I sat in the theater. And my uninterested brain was then left free to pick at logistical plot problems that normally wouldn't be on my radar, which made things even worse. They introduced this nightshade poison that could, like, kill normal vampires instantly. And I'm just like, crap, if you could stick that on your weapons, how did the lichens not know about this? They've been around for so long. We've had how many movies? There's never been any mention of this poison that if you put it on a blade can instantly kill a normal vampire. Where the crap was this in the franchise leading up to this point? Also, why don't vampires ever strike while the lichens are changing? I know that as a movie, they kind of want to showcase the lichens changing, but I don't know how many times in this movie I saw, vampires just kind of like watching at the ready as their enemy lichens turned from their human form into their werewolf form, and it seems to be a time where they're kind of like contorting and stuff like that, and I'm like, strike now, strike now! But they don't ever take advantage of that tactic. Celine also did this super cool, like, super speed move to kill a bunch of lichens, and then like a few seconds later, there's a bunch more enemies in the room, and she doesn't do that again to take care of them. I'm like, why doesn't she just do that again? That was cool, and it totally took care of them. So there's just all these little kind of logical inconsistencies that maybe exist in the other movies in the franchise, but because I don't care about the characters, my mind is just more free to. I got nothing else to think about and care about, so I'm like, oh, what's that? That's weird, you know. So, big bummer. As far as the cast, you know, I don't think any of these actors are bad, but they weren't given material, I don't think, to showcase their abilities. Compare this movie to Michael Sheen's fantastic performance as Lucian, specifically in Rise of the Lycans. Man, that was a tragic, a haunting performance in a couple scenes, not through the whole movie, but that is so much more character driven and emotionally involving compared to this movie, and that's why it's my favorite of the series. As far as like stunts and visuals, I don't know. The werewolves haven't gotten much better over the course of the series. They still swap back and forth between obvious CGI, which is obvious to my cursed eyes anyway. You know, I just have eyes that pick out CGI. But, you know, maybe to a lot of other people, it won't bother them at all. But then they swap over to these stiff physical suits for the werewolves that lack any realistic joint movement. Now, I'd still take doing that, swapping over and having some physical, you know, version of the werewolves on set over doing all CG. But I would have liked to have seen significant improvement in the quality of both the CG and the articulation of the werewolf suits. Okay, so I always try to ask myself, you know, is there anything of moral, philosophical, or spiritual significance in these movies that might stimulate worthwhile thought or conversation as a result of checking it out? Well, not much jumped out. I mean, I really felt like I had to look for it. It's just not that kind of movie that's really, I don't think, trying to say anything. You know. It just does what it does, which is probably fine for most people that are, you know, watching these movies and that are fans of these movies, I would guess, because I keep making them. One character that dies and comes back to life says later that they are no longer afraid of death because they've experienced it once already. But I'd argue that this was like a near-death experience in which, you know, perhaps by biological measurements they were dead. But, you know, I think, you know, we give a lot of weight to near-death experiences as if they are actual death experiences. But it's worth keeping in mind that when we hear about near-death experiences, actual death is something people don't come back from. They might be biologically, you know, inert, but they're not, you know, in the true sense, the all-encompassing sense of that word, dead. So I think we shouldn't look to those kinds of stories, those near-death experience stories, as indicators of what the eternal post-life state is for humans. But anyway, that's really just me magnifying one little line and like trying to find something, you know, worthwhile to think or talk about. I also think it's interesting that the filmmakers shy away from giving us a continuation of the Celine/Michael romance or the mother-daughter story. The first three movies, two of them featuring Celine and Michael, the other one featuring Lucian and Sonia, were these star-crossed lover dramas, you know, and we haven't seen that ever since the last movie came out. They've just abandoned that type of tension in the drama. So they haven't given us a continuation of that. They also haven't given us a continuation of the mother-daughter story, which I was just like, man, it was totally underdeveloped in my opinion in Awakening, and I was hoping that maybe they would get into it more, or like I said, at least kill her off, and I don't know. And I think that's probably because developed family dramas, whether it's romance or parent-child, don't sell to the target audience. That's my guess. I'd love to see Hollywood inject more developed romance and family relationships into these kinds of movies. You know, if all we knew was what movies told us, you'd think that a relationship kind of just hits its absolute peak when you finally have sex, or maybe when you get married, you know. But my wife and I just celebrated yesterday our 15th anniversary, and trust me, there are plenty of dramatic ups and downs that can come long after the honeymoon is over. There's so much, you know, potential for dramatic material that could be mined from a long-term marriage relationship, or from, same goes for having kids, as I've begun discovering over the last 9 years. That said, Hollywood, as I think I implied a moment ago, is probably just reacting to the market here, and the target audience is probably somehow giving off data that says we don't care about marriage, or family relationships. And as a potential indicator of where we're at as human beings. That's a real bummer. All right, well, I have no idea what your tastes are in movies, but if I were a time traveler, I'd go back in time and say, Peter, wait. You want to red box this, or you want to buy it real cheap in the bargain bin before the next movie releases, which is already in development and sounds like it will serve as an end to this franchise and or a beginning to its next leg. Celine's story is not over. It will likely be concluded in the next movie, and your only chance of enjoying this movie is if somehow it looks better retroactively in light of the next movie. I don't know what they're going to do that would make that happen, but we'll see if that movie is even ever made. All right, well, those are my thoughts. I'd love to get yours in the comments below. Visit spiritblade.com if you want to support this channel and see what we have for you there. Like, share, and subscribe if you like this video, want to share it with somebody else, and want more videos like it. Also, there's a ton more content and community, boom, at christiangeekcentral.com. I hope you join us there soon. You can't even see that I'm looking for the button. And, oh, no, I covered up my script here. Join us as soon as we continue. I should have that memorized. Geek out, seek truth, right?